Welcome to Swords and Hammers, where truth comes clothed in tales and the soul remembers what the mind forgets. The world is loud, but for these few minutes, it can wait. Settle in and listen well. The Shepherd's Valley, a tale of one who did not walk alone. I smelled the fear before I saw the army. It hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire, sour and thick, drifting across the hills as I walked the road from Bethlehem. My father Jesse had sent me with provisions for my brothers. Roasted grain, 10 loaves of bread, 10 cuts of cheese for their captain. Simple errands for a shepherd boy. I had expected to find soldiers. What I found instead was a camp of ghosts. The men of Israel sat in clusters, their weapons beside them, but their eyes empty. Veterans who had fought the Philistines for years. They now stared at the ground, as if the earth itself might swallow them whole. I asked a soldier where I could find my brothers, and he pointed toward the front lines without speaking. His hands trembled. I had seen lambs shake like that when wolves circled the flock. But these were not lambs. These were warriors of Israel, and something had broken them. I found Eliab near the supply wagons. He was sharpening a sword that he clearly had no intention of using. He looked older than I remembered, the lines around his eyes deeper, his jaw tight with something between anger and shame. "David, you should not have come," he said. My other brothers stood nearby. None of them would look me in the eyes. Before I could answer, a sound rolled across the valley. It was a voice, but it seemed too large for any human throat. The words echoed off the hills like thunder. Every soldier in the camp went deathly still. I turned toward the sound and saw him for the first time. He stood at the valley's edge, a mountain of bronze and flesh, nearly 10 feet tall if he was an inch. His armor caught the morning sun and blazed like fire. A spear thick as a weaver's beam rested in his hand, and behind him walked a shield-bearer carrying a shield larger than a table. The giant's voice boomed across the divide. "Choose a man for yourselves," he roared, "and let him come down to me." And then he laughed. It was the laughter of a man who had grown accustomed to silence as his only answer. The laughter of one who believed himself beyond challenge. I felt something kindle in my chest, small at first, then building like a flame fed by wind. It was not fear. It was fury. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine," I said, "that he should defy the armies of the living God?" The soldiers nearby looked at me as if I had lost my mind. Perhaps I had. Perhaps faith always looks like madness to those who have forgotten. My brother grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. "Why have you come down here?" he hissed. "I know your pride and the wickedness of your heart. You came to watch the battle like some spectator at a feast." His words stung, but I had heard worse from lions. I pulled free and turned away, still asking my question to anyone who would listen. Who was this giant? Why did no one answer him? Was there not a cause worth dying for? Word reached King Saul that a shepherd boy from Bethlehem was asking dangerous questions. They brought me before him in his tent, and I saw immediately that the king was as frightened as his soldiers. He wore his armor, but it hung on him like a costume. His eyes flickered toward the valley, then away, as if even the thought of that place caused him pain. "You cannot fight this Philistine," he said. "You are only a youth, and he has been a warrior since his youth." I understood his reasoning. By every measure that men use to calculate victory, he was right. But I had learned to think differently. "Your servant kept his father's sheep," I said. "And when a lion came and took a lamb from the flock, I went out after it, and struck it, and delivered the lamb from its mouth." The king stared. I continued, "When it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear." The words sounded strange even to my own ears, like a tale from someone else's life, but they were true. In the hills above Bethlehem, alone with my flock, I had faced death twice and found it wanting. Not because I was strong, because the Lord who watched over the sheep watched over me as well. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, I said. He will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Go," he said, "and the Lord be with you." He gave me his armor, bronze helmet, coat of mail, the sword of a king. I put them on and tried to walk, but the weight pressed me toward the earth. I had not tested these things. They belonged to another man's way of fighting. "I cannot go with these," I said, removing the armor, piece by piece. "I have not tested them." Saul looked relieved. Perhaps he thought I would come to my senses and stay. But I was already moving toward the door, the sling in my hand, the memory of lions and bears burning bright behind my eyes. The brook at the valley's bottom ran cold and clear. I knelt beside it and chose 5 stones. I turned each one quickly in my fingers, feeling their weight. They were ordinary stones, river-tumbled, palm-sized, unremarkable in every way. But I had spent years with this sling. I knew what it could do. More importantly, I knew who guided my hand. A shepherd does not protect his flock through strength alone. A shepherd protects his flock through presence. Day after day, night after night, you stand between the sheep and whatever comes for them. You learn that faithfulness in small things prepares you for faithfulness in larger things. You learn that the God who watches over sparrows also watches over shepherd boys. And you learn that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the presence of something greater than fear. I rose from the brook and began walking toward the giant. He saw me coming and laughed again, but this time the laughter sounded forced. "Am I a dog?" he bellowed, "that you come to me with sticks?" He cursed me by his gods. He promised to give my flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. His words rolled across the valley like thunder, designed to freeze my blood and turn my legs to water. I felt my heartbeat quicken. I felt my palms grow damp. But beneath the fear, something else burned. It was joy. Strange, impossible joy. Because I knew something that the giant would never understand until it was too late. "You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin," I called back, and my voice didn't waver. "But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." The giant's smile flickered. I saw it. For just a moment, something in his eyes changed. Then he began moving toward me, that enormous spear rising, that mountain of bronze lurching forward to crush the shepherd boy who dared speak sacred names. I did not retreat. I ran toward him. The sling whirled twice above my head, singing its familiar song. I had made this motion 10,000 times in the hills, bringing down wolves and lions, protecting what my father had entrusted to me. But this time was different. This time the whole world seemed to hold its breath. The stone left the sling. It flew true. I watched it cross the distance between us, a small grey blur against the morning sky, and I knew with absolute certainty that it would find its mark. The Lord of Hosts doesn't miss. The stone struck the giant's forehead with a sound like a hammer on bronze. For a moment he stood there, swaying, his eyes wide with surprise. Then his knees buckled. Then that mountain of flesh and armor crashed forward into the dust of the Valley of Elah, and the ground shook with his falling. Behind me, the Israelite army erupted. Shouts rose like a wave breaking against the shore. Men who had cowered for 40 days suddenly found their legs, their voices, their swords. But I was already running forward, my eyes fixed on the fallen giant. He was not yet dead. I could see his chest still moving, his fingers twitching against the dirt. His sword lay beside him, that massive blade I could barely lift. I bent down and seized it. The giant's eyes found mine. In that moment, I saw something I had not expected. I saw understanding. He knew. At the very end, he finally knew. The battle had never belonged to the strong. The battle had always belonged to the Lord. I raised the sword. I finished what God had begun. They tell the story differently now. They speak of my courage, my skill, my boldness. They make me sound like a hero who conquered through his own strength. But I remember the brook. I remember the cold water running over my hands as I chose those stones. I remember the absolute confidence that I didn't walk alone. The giant trusted in bronze and iron. He trusted in the praise of priests and the fear of armies. He built his life on the foundation of his own strength, and when that foundation crumbled, he had nothing left to stand upon. I carried no such burden. I was small, I was young, I was utterly insufficient for the task, and that was precisely why the Lord chose me. He delights in proving that his power is made perfect in weakness, that his glory shines brightest through vessels that possess no glory of their own. The battle in the valley was never about David defeating Goliath. It was about the living God demonstrating to all the earth that he alone is worthy of trust. All I did was believe it and walk forward. All I did was refuse to let fear write the story. That is what faith looks like when it meets its test. Not the absence of trembling, but the presence of a God who fights for those who carry his name into the places where giants roar and armies flee. I still keep the giant's sword. Some nights I look at it and remember the weight of it in my hands, the way the morning sun caught the blade as I lifted it. And I remember what I learned in that valley, the lesson I have carried through every battle since. The Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is his, and he gives victory to those who trust him. The stones are still in the brook, the giants still roar, and the God who delivered me, he still waits for those brave enough to believe. Selah.